panel will be the landscape beyond the third-party cookie. And I'm pleased to introduce the moderator for this session, Sara Vincent. And apologies for delivering you the moderator mic a little bit late. I was poor in my timekeeping in the last one. Again, to everyone else, don't forget to submit your cues to the panel using the Q&A box located at the bottom of the Zoom. Over to you. I think we're waiting for just Sara to panel as a panelist. Okay, it looks like we're having a couple of challenges here. If you wouldn't mind giving us a check. And while in the panel as well, I think we've got, it looks like we've got nearly everybody else. I don't mind stepping in right now, just while we're waiting for Sara to join. As always, technical issues. I just asked Sara to raise her virtual hand, but while we're waiting for Sara to join the session to be the moderator, be on the panel to introduce themselves, if that's okay.
Yep, maybe I should go first then.
That'll be amazing. Thank you.
Thanks, David. So hi everyone, I'm Akshay Bhattacharjee and I'm the Programmatic Solution Specialist at IAS, and I'm a panelist today for the hot topic of programmatic advertising beyond third-party cookies.
I'm Tom Kershaw. I'm Chief Technology Officer at Magnite. Hi everybody.
Hi there, my name is Ben Hancock. I am Head of Programmatic Trading at CNN International.
Hi, I'm Jacob Beck. I'm co-founder at AdForm.
Fantastic. Thank you all.
Hi, I'm no worries at all. Hi, I'm Victor Zawadzki from MediaMath. I'm the General Manager for APAC and EMEA.
And I'm very pleased to say, Sara, you're now in. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, David, for stepping in. I've been like eagerly waiting to join, but yeah, technical issues, as you say. So thank you for stepping in. Thank you for the introductions panel. It's great to see you here today. Just for intro on my side, I'm Sara Vincent. I head up the strategic partner development team at IndexExchange. And we're here today to talk about like life after the third-party cookie, what the world would look like. At Index, we've been focused on this for quite some time, but I'm keen today to share or listen to thoughts from the panelists as to how we got to this position we're in today, which is probably fair to say we're in quite a disruptive transition period. What the future looks like, the opportunities and challenges that are going to face us, and we'll end this time on a prediction on where we see ourselves this time next year. So without further ado, I will move on. Just quick housekeeping. If you do have questions, please put them in the Q&A. We'd love to be able to include some audience questions into this time as well. And thank you. So Ben, I'll start with you. How have we got ourselves into this position that we're in today?
Yeah, hi, thanks Sara. So I think this is part of a much wider narrative. So what we saw with cookies is they were really game-changing technology. And they really revolutionized audience targeting. But I think that led to overabuse and to overuse and abuse by bad actors in what is a small amount of bad actors in what is a quite complex and opaque ecosystem. I think the answer to a lot of solutions were seen as more data, more attribution, more measurement. And I think ultimately this led to what we saw a couple of years ago as a bit of a consumer backlash over privacy and use of data. I think the industry could have done more to make that value exchange more explicit. And ultimately what we're seeing now is that legislation is catching up with the ethics. So I think this is, like I said, I think that this is part of a wider narrative. And I don't think that we should be particularly surprised with hindsight that this is where we are. And I think it's just important to make the point that it's only actually third-party cookies that are going away. So publishers can obviously still retain first-party cookies, and we can do everything that we could before within our within our own sites.
Thanks for that. So that's one element of it. Do you also feel that there's been an impetus to look at life outside third-party cookie and bring more authentication due to moving ad spends across to walled gardens that we've seen perhaps in the last couple of years, really? Do you think that also factors into where we are today?
Yeah, definitely. And I think what's happened is this has created a real incentive for the markets, for publishers and for advertisers to refocus their resources onto really fixing those solutions. So, and again, that, like I said, with that spend shifting over, that's a really big important part of it as well.
Thank you. Akshay, do you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. And I just want to add a couple of points from my side as well, that consumers now, they understand that their data is more valuable than gold, and that's what is actually fueling this entire online advertising industry, right? Furthermore, because of some events in the past that had data privacy scandals with consumers are now, let's say, much more aware of how their data is being tracked, and that it's not just social media networks which are able to get this data. There are also third-party, let's say, players which are able to get their consumer data, which are actually able to get the consumer data and also maybe sell it. So when we look at GDPR, CCPA, this has really been, let's say, a step in the right direction for the consumers. But the fact still remains that do we have regulators who can, strictly or more aggressively enforce these regulations? And how do, let's say, ad tech companies also respond to this? We've seen, for example, IAS had a consumer data privacy study recently. This was, I think, so back in April or May this year. And we understood that 94% of UK consumers care more about their data, and they were, let's say, open to not having to be targeted by these ads. So 6 out of 10 consumers are willing to receive less targeted ads as opposed to sharing this personal information. So are we going to see this proper balance between consumer privacy and ad relevancy for the advertisers? This is something that the industry needs to understand, and this is where I think we are also progressing towards.
Cool, that makes sense. So user first, which is absolutely the end game here. Jacob, what do you see as some of the key opportunities and challenges in making our way towards this user first, privacy first ecosystem?
Well, it just started raining crazy here, so there might be a challenge with the sound, but I hope you can hear me despite the rain.
You're good for now.
Okay, great. So yeah, I think there are plenty of challenges and opportunities here. I think one of the bigger ones that we've been running into is, of course, aligning on industry standards and obviously through organizations like IAB or Prebid. But I think there's been really good progress lately, and Tom might touch on it. I mean, especially the PubCom and ID, I think it's a really good example of a future-proof and both GDPR and user-friendly ID. That being said, of course, I mean, I think one of the challenges is that that's not going to be the only ones, right? There are already lots of national solutions like NetID, etc., company-owned IDs, which might not be the best way to sort of avoiding mistakes. And we have been part of the problem too. I mean, the first implementations we've done with publishers on first-party IDs, I mean, we came up with our own standards because there wasn't any at that. So I think aligning on the standards is definitely, both an opportunity and a challenge. I have to also say, I mean, down the line, I do see a challenge in, the broadcasting of user emails through RTB. I mean, that does make me nervous on the long term in terms of, incidents, PR headwind for the industry, et cetera, or maybe regulatory intervention, et cetera. Also, personally, as a consumer, I mean, I can definitely see, an issue in that. So that's also a challenge I see in the long term.
Tom, do you agree with that?
Well, absolutely. I think Jacob nailed it. The most important thing here is collaboration and standards. We've had too much balkanization and everyone kind of going their own direction. And we have a limited amount of time to come up with a standardized approach for how we use identifiers, and also how we explain the internet to users. I think that's the most important thing. I mean, in 10 years, the whole structure of the digital economy has exploded and changed, but there's never been a renewed dialogue to the user to explain the trade-offs that you have. You can consume content with your wallet, you consume content with your time. Those are the options, and I think that those choices are good choices, and it's good that consumers have the choice. They can choose to see ads, they can choose to pay with money, but we haven't explained how that works. And I think the only way we can explain the internet is if we do it together in a consistent way. So I think these standards and collaborative efforts are super critical.
Yeah, I see. Thanks, Tom. Victor, you're nodding your head there. Do you have anything else to add on this from your side?
Maybe just like even strengthening the point to see, like there's been a Jones Media study this year which says 80% of all visitors come from the free or go into the free independent internet outside of walled gardens. When you look at advertising spend across the internet, it's exactly the opposite. Like 70% of spend goes into walled gardens, and that's one point. When we see that in an even bigger context, and we look across the biggest challenge or the priority to make the internet consumer first or customer first, then all of a sudden we look into not only how friendly advertising is, we see advertising that consumers love, but we as well look into market power and how it's changing, right? And let's say everybody will remember from their own studies, like monopolies and oligopolies are never good for consumers and never good for advertisers in our case, right? And looking across the board here, and every faces like we are representing in the end the free and independent ones. And as you just mentioned, Jacob and Tom, like the collaboration between is even more important right now than it used to be before. And as well, like from an advertising standpoint, relying on companies spending advertising money who are completely vertically integrated across media or demand side, supply side, measurement, content, and so on, and being a black box is something which cannot be good for customers as well, not for the outcome of advertisers marketing actually. But looking across a fragmented, maybe now harder to navigate ecosystem, but which is aligned and independent and aligned especially with interests of advertisers and align with the real outcomes, not only outcomes which you see in online reports, is something which we need to get to. And I think that's the big challenge. And Tom, to fully agree like that, the window of opportunity and timing is not going to be endless, right? So it's really on us right now to get together and as well speed up for the good of the consumers.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've touched on something there around accountability, auditability. If these two phrases are not the most overused terms by the teams that are actually collaborating to create these solutions, they should be. I think that we've learned, there's definitely some mistakes we've done in the past that we can learn from here. So that all makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Akshay, what about, from your point of view, what do you see as some of the key components of the future cookieless, third-party cookieless world?
Yeah, so Sara, it always comes back to the consumer, right? Out here, we are trying to understand what kind of transparency the consumer wants. So they need to understand how the data is being collected, where is it being stored, and how is it actually being used. So we need to, again, like I said, we need to have this balance between consumer data privacy and also have ad relevancy when we're talking towards brands and advertising. A potential outcome that we actually see is in this cookieless world is how marketers can actually turn back towards contextual targeting, right? It's also performance-based, and the basic idea, the concept of contextual targeting is to make sure that the context is relevant, of course, and it's in the right environment. And that really does not depend on the cookie data from the user. Another important aspect is that contextual targeting is an easy way or a more meaningful way for the marketer to actually continue delivering relevant ads at scale and also have a meaningful connection with the users without any sort of cookie, without any sort of dependency on the cookies. Nowadays, we've seen contextual targeting also move beyond the old ways of just like, keywords or content on the page to something which is more, let's say, revolutionized, which is, for example, targeting based on ads which are having sentiment or emotions, the placement of the ads, time of day. There are several other factors. And what I think what has happened in the last, let's say, few years is that we've evolved from content being king to context being the new king, right? A simple example is that, let's say if I'm an auto company, automobile provider. So for me, I would want to show up against articles which are relevant towards automobile or any sort of car related articles. But with the evolution, I can take control of the context that I show up against and make sure that, I'm not showing up against articles which might be related to automobile pollution or any sort of callbacks of auto. So I'm protecting myself while also taking care that, it's helping the publisher. It's also not invading the privacy of the consumers. And in fact, tying ads to the environment can actually create more meaningful insights for, or let's say the bond between the advertiser and the consumer will definitely get stronger. And IAS also had a recent study where we understood that 37% or more of the consumers found ads to be really helpful when they were contextually relevant in the surrounding content. So the better the semantic technology used out here, or the intelligence technology that's being used out here, marketers can minimize their wastage. They can definitely maintain their efficiency and also safeguard their budgets.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. What I'm keen to understand is that, how big a piece of the puzzle is contextual going to be? Like, how much will it actually solve for? Ben, from your point of view as a publisher, have you seen the evolution of contextual that Akshay has just mentioned, actually bringing you this increased revenue and benefiting from that? And how big a part do you see that playing in the future? Or do you have other strategies that you're employing now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Akshay made some really good points there on contextual and how this technology has really evolved. I think it'd be good to give everyone a bit of idea about what we've done at CNN International to put this into context. So we've recently relaunched our audience first strategy, and that really puts audiences at the heart of every campaign instead of focusing on platforms or geography. And to implement that, we've built our own technology, and this really shifts emphasis from brand safety to brand suitability. So it's more about where brands do want to be rather than where they don't. And really, that focus is about putting brands in the right places, meaning that brands align their messages with topics that are more desirable. And we built two tools to be able to do that. So the first one is SAM, which is the sentiment analysis moderator, and that analyzes context and nuance using neurolinguistic AI. And the second is CEP, the contextual engagement platform. So that's about content classification. So as well as using the IAB taxonomy, it also includes human involvement in classifying content as well. And I think what this has demonstrated is that context and how publishers approach context has really evolved in recent years. And the fact third parties cookies are going away really creates a really strong incentive for publishers to get behind that, to invest in it. Like I said, it's technology that Warner Media's built working with CNN International. And this creates a much more nuanced, much more effective way for brands to engage with our content and our audience. So yeah, absolutely. I think this is going to be a really big part of how we solve these problems.
Okay, thanks. So contextuals one, first party data, publisher first party data, audience segments another. Victor, what's your view from the buy side?
So like adding on that and couldn't agree more. What we look at from a little hopefully bigger context is to say, like, how can we look at the ecosystem to be more addressable? You said it, probably the most overused word very soon. accountable as well to see like who's adding which part of the value to campaigns and aligned as well, right? So the vision, and this is something we made the core of our strategy at MediaMath, to create an ecosystem which makes it possible for the advertiser to understand the whole supply chain, including the financials, but not only that, but as well the impact. If you want to think of an example to say like, what if then you could basically see what an advertiser puts into as goals, puts into as budgets, and puts into as well like other metrics into a DSP like ours, and then would be able to optimize against those metrics across the whole supply chain, maybe via Magnite, who can then as well like put all the functions and possibilities to adjust and to optimize against that. So you really have an aligned ecosystem with all transparency across SSPs like an AdForm and the Magnite, and come to a much more effective advertising and media optimization that we are right now. Identity, which is something which is across, or needs to be across the whole supply chain, and something which we believe at least like to be 15%, which ISBA has basically lost, to be found in there in the future at least.
That's interesting. Tom, what do you think about that? Obviously, you mentioned about Magnite working with MediaMath in this respect.
I totally agree with that, but I do think that we as an industry are overtraining on two concepts when we talk about identity. The first thing we're overtraining on is targeting. Targeting is important, but attribution is more important. And there's not enough discussion in the industry around what attribution models and how we're able to demonstrate to advertisers what their dollars did. That has to be the front and center in this conversation. Targeting, I'm pretty comfortable we can figure out. Attribution needs a lot more discussion. The other thing that we're overtraining on is browsers. None of us are using browsers right now. We're all in an app, and that is more and more what people will be doing when they consume the digital economy. And we talk about cookies. IDFAs and mobile identifiers are going away before cookies go away. That's going to happen next year. There never was a stable identifier in CTV or for CTV devices. So what we need to think about is the relationship between digital content and users across all media types. And we need to come up with solutions that will work and be common across those, because the use of web browsers is not the growing and interesting part of the internet economy. It's CTV, it's apps, and it's all these new things, whether it's out of home or audio or smart speakers. That's where we have to go as an industry, instead of training on something that was super relevant a few years ago, but less so now. So we need to think about attribution, and we need to think about cross-device.
I think that's a really good point, and you know, this obviously will affect across all environments, and we do focus a lot, and a lot of conversation has been focused on you know, Chrome deprecating the cookie in 2022. Now, I actually read yesterday that might be pushed a bit because of, you know, there doesn't seem to be that much development or progress being made today. And so it's a really important point not to get too focused on the browser side. As you said, like, we are seeing users in many other environments, expedited by this year by this really unusual, unprecedented year. But it's beyond that, and it's back to that bigger picture view about people think of this as there's a deadline next year, but it's not next year, it's now is when we actually need to be talking about it, and all together. Jacob, do you have any final points on this question?
No, I mean, it's hard to disagree with any of it. I just want to say, from a technical perspective, I mean, I'm an engineer, and when I look at third-party cookies, I have no doubt that, you know, first-party IDs is the replacement, and I think we can see evidence of that now, where we are starting to get close to 10% when we look into the bit stream. Of such IDs being then set instead, and to the discussion around browsers, I mean, they apply to all environments. So I really think that is what we will see as the way forward, and I think it will benefit large quality publishers like CNN, because their IDs, their first-party IDs, will be worth a lot more than, you know, a long-tail publisher, etc. Yeah,
that makes sense. So we've got a big audience today, and they're made up of everyone's clients that are on this panel today. So what is the one thing that you are telling your clients or your partners today? Like, what is your line of narrative around you know, as we transition to this new world, like what is the one piece of advice that you would like your clients and partners to take away and act upon today? Tom, do you want to kick off with that?
Sure. My one piece of advice is do something. I think we spend too much time on panels talking about stuff that's not super relevant, and we don't spend enough time putting production stuff out there and making it work. So if anyone, whether you're a publisher, a buyer, or a platform, if you're not experimenting with first-party identifiers, to Jacob's point, if you're not starting to do real work around first-party data and segment creation, if you're not figuring out how to talk to your users about how the internet works, the clock is ticking. We cannot continue to analysis paralysis ourselves here. We have to start developing the new internet. It's going to be fun. It's going to be challenging, but I urge everyone to act and start contributing.
Act now, Victor.
Yeah, that's actually what I plan to say. So the other thing is, it's fine. The other thing is, I think it's probably as important as well. I think in phases, right? So like jumping in the cookieless world right now will not replace what we have right now. If you plan in terms of doing a proof of concept right now with a solution and then jumping into the next one and the next one and scaling it across the next year and the year after, that's the only way to be successful. Like keep the reach and keep the accuracy and as well proof point of marketing spend. That's something which requires a lot of I think mental change, or say mentality change and flexibility. But as well, like it's gonna be a lot of fun, challenging. I think as well, I strongly believe in a strong market change or market structure change in the next couple of years. So a lot of opportunity out there.
Thank you. Akshay?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, so from IAS's perspective, we are proactively working to ensure that we are able to continue to support all our clients through these times of change, and we encourage all our clients to actually join in, help shape the new ad ecosystem. And the best way to do it, like Tom mentioned, is like to do something, voice your opinions, make sure your voice is actually heard, do the testing. And we are also telling our publishers and advertisers, try to protect the first party data, but also make use of your first party data to maximize it, right? And the only way, like one of the ways that you can actually do it is through the contextual solutions that IAS is offering. You can focus on the contextual part of it, and then like also make sure you're broadening the investments for your first party data, and it's aligned to the advertiser side, so there is a proper a proper match between the publisher and the advertiser. And that's not only with brand safety, but actually the brand suitability part, because we're not trying to only focus on avoiding content, right? That's not the actual goal. The goal is to positively, or to make sure that we're contextually targeting good content out there, which helps the publishers, but also helps the advertisers and keeping the consumers, safe. That's my take on it.
Ben, do you agree with that? Do you have anything else to add from your perspective?
Yeah, definitely. So I think again, as we've always said with programmatic, we're going through a time of a lot of change. It kind of feels like there's more change now. I certainly think that third-party cookies and these identity questions are going to accelerate a lot of that change. My key message really to our clients though is that please work with us directly, as opposed to buying us or trying to buy premium publishers right across huge chunks of the web. There are, of course, other challenges in the industry that we haven't talked about, but a lot of it we can solve. It kind of goes away when we've got those one-to-one relationships between buyers and sellers. Through programmatic guaranteed, through PMPs, they're a more trusted, more transparent environment. We can offer bespoke, curated solutions, and we can better use our first-party data, and we can better use those tools that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, this getting closer with publisher and buyer makes a huge ton of sense. And I've actually heard of some examples of instances where that collaboration has happened, the closeness has been brought together, and there has been like purchases and transactions end to end without using the third-party cookie. So I see that kind of these are the helping us make those first steps towards proving the case for the ability to buy without the third-party cookie. Victor, I think we discussed before, like an instance where you were working with Super Awesome. Was that a similar scenario there that you would?
It's yes and no, right? I think that's an interesting one. It's the context of that is a challenge where we see, like, the last thing everybody wants is to manipulate kids actually and advertise to children on one hand, right? So like dangerous when you're an advertiser and you have kids products. There's a lot of regulations around it. Maybe something which we might see as well, like being requirements for in the future for all advertising, but maybe not. Like let's see how good of a job we can do. The context here is to say, like, how can we utilize partnerships in getting to the next phase of identity, and as well, like in terms of scaling and looking into cookieless future, right? And Super Awesome is one partner of ours who provide quite a innovative solution, say like how to be legally compliant, how to be as well like ethic compliant, and advertise kids products to future consumers, right? So again, like on one hand, a very critical thing to do it right, but on the other hand as well, like something which they developed, and which we're working together closely to say, be safe on the privacy side, which is a big challenge on one hand, strip off every identifier you could think of. On the other hand as well, like make 100% sure with a manual check that any advertising which is showed, including product, including message, is done as well, so that advertisers and clients of ours, like the Mattels of the world, of other, can provide or can advertise their products without running into any legal and as well like any ethical any ethic challenges.
Excellent, thank you, Victor. I see David's appeared. I feel like, oh, gonna get told off in a second. Do we have 30 seconds left, David?
30 seconds. Yes, take 30 seconds. Helen will turn off, but take 30 seconds, please.
Cool. So just to wrap up, I'm sorry, Jacob, but I just would like to hear your answer on what you're telling your clients today. Like, what piece of advice are you giving them? Would you like them to be acting on?
Well, basically everything Tom said, except for not being on panels. I'm sorry, I'm not living up to that one. But I mean, we are telling them to get started, and that a lot of publishers and advertisers think they have to choose some sort of ID solution. But I mean, it is a multi-ID world that we're going to go into. And so just getting started with the IDs that are already out there from quite a few publishers is what we advise them. Start some test campaigns, start learning. I mean, it's better sooner than later.
Yeah, amazing, thank you. And that's coming through loud and clear from the panel. It's act now, collaborate now, start testing, and don't wait for the one solution that will dominate. There will be multiple solutions. So start testing. Thank you so much for your time today. It's great to hear from you. David, I see there's some questions here, so perhaps we can follow up with those afterwards. Yeah.
Absolutely. Our goal to all the audience is to take your questions, get some answers to them, and share them with everybody who joined today's Virtual Programmatic Day. So watch this space. But really great panel. Thank you very much, Sarah, and all panelists. A really good discussion, and with some really good advice as well.